and what they lost. They were born 19 years ago in a small town outside Nashville. Their mother Denise raised them alone in a two-bedroom apartment that smelled like lavender and hymns. She worked double shifts at a laundromat 6 days a week. When the twins were 5, Denise started coughing. Not the kind that comes with a cold, the kind that doesn't stop. She went to a clinic. They said she needed tests. She said she didn't have insurance. They said, come back when she did. She never went back. By the time the twins turned 14, Denise was gone. Pneumonia. Treatable. Completely treatable. If someone had just let her through the door. After Denise passed, they had one person left. Their grandmother, Estelle Foster. And if you knew anything about gospel music in that part of Tennessee, you knew her name. Estelle directed the choir at Greater Hope Baptist for 31 years. She didn't just lead singers, she built them. People drove from 3 counties over to hear what her choir could do on a Sunday morning. She took the twins in the week Denise died. Didn't ask questions, just showed up with 2 suitcases and said, "Get your things, you're coming home." Home had a piano in the living room, older than Estelle herself. Every morning before school, she sat the twins down and made them sing. Not for fun, for survival. The world is going to look at you and decide who you are before you open your mouth. So when you do open it, make sure they can never forget what they heard. She trained them from age 4. By 10, they were the backbone of Greater Hope's choir. She believed when 2 people just harmonize, they fuse. She called it singing from the same wound. She taught them one song nobody else ever heard. A spiritual she wrote herself. Never performed it, never recorded it. Just played it on that old piano late at night and made the twins learn every note. When Sienna asked why she never sang it for anyone, Estelle said, "It's not time yet. You'll know when." Estelle passed 2 years ago, 81, in her sleep. The twins found her in the morning, hands folded on her chest like she'd arranged herself. After that, no family, no savings, no home. They aged out of every system, bounced between shelters, eventually landed in Nashville, sleeping in a tent under an overpass. Solomon picked up odd jobs. Sienna sold charcoal portraits on flattened boxes for $3 each. On a good day, they ate twice. On a bad day, they split a gas station sandwich. But every night, they sang. Under that overpass, trucks rumbling overhead, rain dripping through concrete. Not for money, because it was the only thing left that still felt like home. Now, about Gerald Whitmore. Gerald owned Whitmore's Table. Upscale Southern fusion. White tablecloths, $40 steaks, wine list longer than most grocery receipts. The restaurant sat on a block that used to be the heart of a black neighborhood. Before developers moved in, rents tripled, and old businesses got replaced by places like Gerald's. He sat on the business improvement district, called the police on homeless people more times than his staff could count. Once, had a black street musician arrested for loitering. The man had a valid permit. Charges dropped. The musician never came back. His staff knew who he was. Tanya Moore, black waitress, 2 years at the restaurant, kept her head down, served out. The block was getting ready for the Nashville Sounds Street Festival. Gerald was a major sponsor, $25,000. In return, he got a stage right outside his restaurant and personally. That was the world Solomon and Sienna walked into, the night they stood on his sidewalk with a cardboard sign and 2 voices about to rearrange everything. Most people don't know this. Solomon and Sienna didn't wander up to Gerald's restaurant by accident. They were invited. Sort of. Tanya Moore had noticed the twins that week. She'd seen them walking past around closing time, eyes on the kitchen entrance. She knew what they were looking for. Whitmore's table tossed enough food every night to feed a dozen people. Bread baskets, untouched sides, steaks sent back for being medium instead of medium rare. All of it bagged up and dumped by 9:30. Tanya pulled Sienna aside one evening through the service window while Gerald was upstairs. She didn't say much, just enough. "Come around back tomorrow, after 9. I'll leave something by the door." But the twins came early, and they came to the front. Maybe Solomon was tired of back doors. Maybe Sienna was tired of eating leftovers in the dark, like it was something to be ashamed of. Either way, they stood on that sidewalk at 7:45, middle of the dinner rush, holding their sign where every customer could read it. Gerald spotted them in under a minute. The insults, the quarter, the laughter. You know that part. But here's what turned a bad night into something bigger. After calling them animals and telling them to sing, Gerald made a bet. Not quietly. Loud and clear, with 20 witnesses and 3 phones recording. "You sing right here, right now. If it's any good, and I mean actually good, I'll feed you both for a month. On the house." He paused. "But if you sound the way you look, you leave this block tonight and don't come back. Ever." The patio went quiet. Entertained quiet. The kind right before a fight when everyone picks a side and waits. Solomon looked at Sienna. She was shaking. Not from cold. From the kind of anger that doesn't scream. It trembles. Her fingers pressed against the locket, squeezing it like it was the only thing keeping her standing. "We don't have to do this," she whispered. "Not for him." Solomon looked at the quarter on the ground. Still there, catching light from the patio string bulbs. He didn't pick it up. He looked at Gerald, then at the diners, then back at Sienna. "We're not doing it for him. We're doing it for Grandma Estelle. She didn't teach us to sing so we could stay quiet." He turned to Gerald. No anger, no begging, just stillness. "We'll sing." Gerald clapped once, slow and mocking. "The zoo's got spirit tonight. Floor's yours." Solomon and Sienna stepped onto the sidewalk in front of the patio railing. No microphone, no amplifier, no instrument. Just 2 girls and concrete that smelled like kitchen grease and expensive cologne. Solomon leaned close to Sienna, close enough nobody else could hear. "This is the last time we beg." Then he straightened up, took a breath, closed his eyes. The patio noise kept going, clinking, murmuring, low laughter. Nobody expected what was about to happen. Gerald was already shaking his head at a waiter like the punchline had landed. But Sienna opened her mouth, and every sound on that block stopped. The first note came from Sienna. It didn't sound like it came from a 19-year-old girl standing barefoot on a sidewalk. It sounded like it came from somewhere deep underground and floated up through her body like it had been waiting years to escape. She opened with, "His eye is on the sparrow." No introduction, no build-up, just her voice, clean and unguarded, landing on the evening air like a crack of light through a shut door. The first few seconds, nothing changed. A man kept chewing. A woman glanced at her phone. Gerald leaned against the doorframe, smirk still locked in place like he was counting down to the punchline. Then Sienna hit the first sustained note, a soprano line that stretched across the entire block like a wire pulled tight. The woman looked up. The man stopped chewing. A couple across the street slowed down and stood still. Solomon came in 4 bars later. Not with words, with a hum. A low, rolling bass line that started so deep in his chest you could feel it in the pavement. It moved underneath Sienna's voice like a river beneath a bridge, invisible, but holding everything up. When those two voices met in the open air, something shifted on that patio. Not dramatic, not loud, more like the temperature changed. Like the air rearranged itself to make room for what was coming. A woman put her fork down flat on the plate, like she'd forgotten what she was doing with it. Gerald uncrossed his arms. His hands dropped to his sides. For the first time that evening, his mouth was closed. Sienna stepped into the second verse, and Solomon followed with words. His voice wrapped around hers like a hand around a candle flame. Not to put it out, but to keep the wind from touching it. The harmony wasn't studio rehearsed. It was deeper. The kind that only comes from two people who've been singing together since before they could remember why. Estelle had called it singing from the same wound. Two voices that didn't just match in pitch, they matched in pain. When they met in the right place, something happened that couldn't be faked, couldn't be auto-tuned, couldn't grief turned into something beautiful. The twins weren't looking at the crowd. They were facing each other, the way Estelle taught them. You sing to the person who knows your pain, and the world will listen. So that's what they did. And the world around them went still. A man walking his dog had stopped on the far sidewalk, leash slack, both of them motionless. A waitress inside pressed her face against the window, a tray of drinks balanced in one hand, completely forgotten. The diners weren't eating anymore. One woman had her hand over her mouth. A guy in a business suit who'd pulled out his phone to record something funny was still recording. But the grin was gone, and his hand wasn't steady. Then came the moment that would be replayed more than any other part of the video. Midway through the third verse, Sienna held a high note, and Solomon dropped to a near whisper. The contrast was so sharp that for a split second it sounded like 3 voices instead of 2. A phantom tone, a harmonic overtone that only happens when 2 voices align so precisely that the sound waves create a third frequency. It's rare. Vocal coaches spend entire careers trying to teach it. Most never achieve it. It's what happens when 2 voices vibrate at exactly the right relationship to each other. And physics does the rest. If you listen to the recording, and millions eventually would, you can hear it. A third voice hanging between the other 2. Faint, eerie, unmistakable. Nobody who heard it ever called it anything else. The song reached its final verse. Sienna climbed. Solomon steadied beneath her. The harmony tightened until there was no separation, just one sound, wide and aching and full of everything they'd never been given the chance to say. They held the last note for 6 seconds, not wavering, not fading, holding, like they were daring the silence to come take it. Then they stopped. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The clinking was gone. The murmuring was gone. Even the city seemed to have pulled back. Tanya Moore broke it. Standing inside, watching through the service window, she started clapping. Not polite applause, the kind where your palms sting and you don't care. Then the patio followed. 1 person. Then 3. Then all of them. Chairs scraped back. A woman at the corner table was crying. Not one tear, actually crying. The man with the dog clapped against his thigh. Someone shouted, "Again!" Someone else yelled, "Who are you?" Brenda Caldwell was the one crying into her napkin. She reached into her purse, pulled out a business card, and held it like she'd already made a decision she hadn't spoken yet. And Gerald? Still in the doorway, arms down, smirk gone, something complicated on his face. Between shock and something older he didn't have a name for. He didn't clap. He turned around, walked inside, and disappeared behind the kitchen door. He'd made a bet. Every person heard it. 3 phones recorded it. If they were good, he'd feed them for a month. Gerald didn't come back outside that night. The quarter was still on the sidewalk. Nobody picked it up. One more person mattered. Derek Nash, local TV reporter, sitting alone near the back, nursing a bourbon. He'd been recording since Gerald made the bet. After the applause died, he walked to the twins, showed his press badge, and said 6 words. "I'm running this tonight. Trust me." Solomon looked at Sienna. Her hand was on the locket. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying. She was breathing. The kind that happens when you've been holding something in for a long time and finally let go. She nodded. Derek recorded a quick interview on the sidewalk. Names, ages, background. He didn't ask about the sign or the shoes. He asked about the singing. "Where did you learn to do that?" Solomon answered without hesitation. "Our grandmother. She said our voices were hers. She just lent them to us." Derek stopped recording, looked at the twins, looked at the restaurant, looked at the quarter on the concrete. "This is going to be bigger than you think." He was right, but not in the way anyone expected. Derek Nash's clip aired on the 10 o'clock news that night. By midnight, it was on social media. By morning, 200,000 views. By noon, flooded in. Some focused on the voices, the purity, the harmony, that strange third tone. Others focused on Gerald, the quarter, the smirk, the word zoo. Someone screenshotted his face right before he walked away and turned it into a meme. When you try to humiliate greatness, and 3,000 times in 3 hours. The hashtag in hours, trending in Nashville. Within a day, trending nationally. People who'd never heard of Whitmore's Table, never set foot in Tennessee. They were watching the clip on repeat, and they were angry. Not at the twins, at the man who threw the quarter. Gerald woke up to consequences. His restaurant's social media was flooded with 1-star reviews. Not about the food, about him. He didn't respond. He did something worse. He called the police. The report claimed the twins were harassing customers and trespassing. Every word a lie. But Gerald knew how the system worked. He'd used it before. That same morning, he called 3 BID members. By noon, an emergency vote. A public nuisance order banning the twins from performing within 500 feet of Whitmore's Table. Vote was 4-3. 2 of the 3 who sided with Gerald owed him money. 500 feet, the exact radius covering the festival stage Gerald controlled. 3 days before the Nashville Sound Street Festival, the Foster twins were legally banned from being anywhere near it. But Gerald wasn't done. 2 more calls. To festival stage managers who owed him favors. 1 sentence each. "I'm not having vagrants on my stage." Both flagged any future application from the twins as rejected. If it ended there, it would have been just another case of power crushing something small before it got big enough to matter. But something Gerald didn't expect was already moving. Pastor James Holloway recognized the twins on the morning news. 72 years old, still active at Greater Hope Baptist, Estelle's church. He saw her in their faces. The jawline, the eyes, the the way they stood when they sang. He called Tanya Moore and told her something almost nobody knew. Gerald's restaurant was built on the exact ground where Harmony House once stood, a music school founded in '92 by black musicians and educators. One of those founders was Estelle Foster. It ran for 11 years before funding dried up. The property went to tax auction. Gerald bought it, demolished it, built his restaurant on top. The twins had no idea the man who threw a quarter at their feet was standing on the grave of their grandmother's life work. And here's where Gerald made his biggest mistake. The public ban, the police report, the BID vote, it all created a paper trail. And that trail created a new story. Not homeless twins sing beautiful song. Now it was restaurant owner humiliates homeless black teens, then bans them after they go viral. That's a different story. That's a story with a villain. And the internet loves a villain. The clip crossed 2 million views. Hashtag Justice for the Fosters joined hashtag Foster Twins. The people who were angry before were now furious. Gerald tried to use his power to make 2 teenagers disappear. Instead, he turned them into a symbol. And symbols don't disappear, they multiply. Brenda Caldwell hadn't slept well since that night on the patio. She kept hearing the song. Not in her memory, in her chest. That low hum Solomon had carried underneath Sienna's voice. That impossible third tone that had made her put her napkin over her face and cry in front of strangers. She'd sat through hundreds of performances in her career as chair of the Nashville Arts Council. She'd heard trained sopranos. She'd heard gospel choirs that could shake the beams of a church. But she had never, not once in 23 years, heard anything like what those 2 girls did on a sidewalk with no microphone and no shoes. She'd been carrying Derek Nash's business card in her purse. But she didn't call Derek. She called Pastor Holloway. It took 2 conversations and a Sunday afternoon visit to Greater Hope Baptist before she found the twins. They were sitting in the back pew. Sienna was holding a box of Estelle's belongings that the pastor had kept in the church basement for 2 years, waiting for someone to claim it. Brenda sat down next to them. She didn't introduce herself with her title. She just said, "I was there that night, on the patio. I heard you." Then she told them what she wanted to do. The Arts Council operated a second stage at the Nashville Sounds Street Festival, smaller than Gerald's, tucked on a side street 2 blocks over, but outside the 500-foot radius of the BID's ban. Gerald had no authority over it, no sponsorship, no say. Brenda offered the twins a slot on that stage, but she was honest about the risk. The Arts Council stage was reserved for vetted, established acts. Giving a slot to 2 unknown teenagers, homeless, no agent, no press kit, no performance history outside a viral clip, was a stretch. If anyone on the council questioned it, Brenda's credibility was on the line. If the performance went wrong, or if Gerald used it to create controversy, her position as chair could be challenged. "I'm not promising you anything beyond 1 song," she said, "but I'm giving you the one thing that man tried to take from you. A stage." Solomon didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he looked at the box on Sienna's lap. "Can we see what's inside?" Pastor Holloway nodded. Sienna opened the box with both hands, carefully, the way you open something you know you can't replace. Inside, there were 3 things. A faded photograph. Estelle, as a young woman, standing in front of a building with a hand-painted sign above the door that read Harmony House. A stack of handwritten sheet music tied with a ribbon. And a folded note. Solomon picked up the sheet music. He didn't need to read the title.
He recognized the melody from the first 3 notes written on the page. It was the song, the one Estelle had taught them late at night on the old piano, the one she never performed in church, the one she said wasn't ready yet. Sienna unfolded the note. Estelle's handwriting, shaky but deliberate, the way it got toward the end. She read it silently. Her lips moved. Then she closed her eyes and pressed the note against her chest. She didn't read it out loud. Not yet. Solomon looked at the photograph, the building in it, Harmony House. He didn't recognize it, but something about the street behind it looked familiar. The angle of the road, the old oak tree on the corner. Pastor Holloway saw the question forming on his face and answered it before he could ask. That building stood where Gerald Whitmore's restaurant is now. Your grandmother helped build it. He tore it down. The room got very still. Solomon put the photograph back in the box. Slowly. He looked at Sienna. She was still holding the note against her chest. Her other hand was on the locket, the one she wore every day, the one she never opened in front of anyone. She didn't open it now, but her fingers tightened around it, and something passed between the twins that didn't need words. A decision made in silence, a line drawn in a place nobody else could see. Solomon looked at Brenda. We'll take the slot, he said, and we know what we're going to sing.
It took Gerald Whitmore exactly 4 hours to find out about Brenda's offer. A member of the Arts Council, who also sat on the BID, mentioned it casually over a phone call, thinking Gerald already knew. He didn't. And the silence on Gerald's end of the line lasted long enough to make the caller regret bringing it up. Gerald didn't yell. Gerald never yelled. He did something colder. He calculated. By that evening, he had drafted a formal letter to the Nashville Sounds Festival Committee, the body that oversaw all stages, including Brenda's. The letter was polite, professional, devastating. It stated that, as the festival's largest single sponsor, $25,000 paid annually for the last 6 years, Gerald was expressing concern about the inclusion of unvetted, undocumented street performers in the festival lineup. He cited liability issues, insurance gaps, reputational risk. He never mentioned the twins by name. He didn't have to. The last line of the letter read, "Should the committee choose to move forward with this decision, I will regretfully be forced to reconsider my continued financial support of the festival." $25,000. That was the price of 2 girls singing one song. The festival committee held an emergency meeting the next morning. 7 members. Brenda was one of them. Gerald wasn't on the committee, but his letter was read aloud, and his shadow sat in every chair. Brenda argued for the twins. She talked about the viral clip. She talked about the community response. She talked about what the festival was supposed to represent. A celebration of Nashville's musical soul, not a curated showcase for one man's ego. She was calm. She was precise. She was also outnumbered. Gerald's supporters on the committee, 2 members who had received catering contracts through his restaurant, pushed for the twins' removal. They didn't call it censorship. They called it risk management. They talked about crowd control. They talked about setting a precedent. They used every word except the ones that mattered. The vote was tabled, 4-3, to delay the decision until the morning of the festival. The twins were officially in limbo. Not confirmed, not canceled, just floating in the space between someone else's power and their own right to exist. But Gerald wasn't satisfied with limbo. He wanted erasure. That night, a post appeared on a local Nashville blog, one of those semi-anonymous sites that covers neighborhood gossip, restaurant openings, and low-level crime reports. The headline read,
Festival act has criminal record. Should organizers be concerned? The article was short. It mentioned that Solomon and Sienna Foster had been previously questioned by law enforcement and had a trespassing incident on their record. It cited a police report from 8 months earlier, a misdemeanor charge for sleeping in a public park after hours. The charge had been dismissed completely. No conviction, no fine, no follow-up. It was the legal equivalent of being told to move along, but the blog didn't mention that. It didn't mention that the trespassing was sleeping. It didn't mention that the charge was dropped. It just used the word criminal in a headline next to two black teenagers' names. The post wasn't signed. But Tanya Moore recognized the writing style. She'd seen Gerald draft similar complaints before, carefully worded, technically accurate enough to avoid libel, emotionally loaded enough to do maximum damage. And she knew exactly which staff member Gerald would have asked to leak it. A line cook named Steve, who owed Gerald 3 months' back pay and would do anything to stay in his good graces. The article got picked up by 2 other local blogs and a neighborhood Facebook group within hours. Some repeating the headline like it was a verdict. I don't want criminals performing at a family festival. Where there's smoke, there's fire. Maybe Gerald was right about them all along. Solomon found the article on a library computer the next afternoon. He sat in front of the screen for a long time, not moving. Then he walked back to the overpass, sat down next to Sienna, and showed her on a borrowed phone. Sienna read it twice. Then she set the phone down on the concrete, pulled her knees to her chest, and said, "Maybe we should just stop." It was the first time she'd said anything like that. Through the shelters, the hunger, the nights under the bridge, the quarter on the sidewalk, she'd never once said stop. She'd cried, she'd gone quiet, but she'd never quit. This was different. This wasn't a man insulting them on a patio. This was a system, a machine, something too big to outperform with a song. You can sing louder than one man. You can't sing louder than a headline. Solomon didn't answer for a while. He sat next to her under the overpass, listening to the trucks rumble overhead, watching the light from the cars streak across the concrete wall in front of them. Then he reached over and took her hand. "Grandma Estelle built a music school," he said, "and a man tore it down. She didn't stop singing. She just found a different room." Sienna didn't respond, but she didn't let go of his hand, and she didn't say, "Stop," again. Oh, hell nah. 2 kids sleeping under a bridge, and this is what they get? A fake headline? Bro, imagine that's you. 19, no home, nothing but your voice, and somebody's trying to bury you with a lie. Stay with me on this one. The first person to move was Tanya Moore, and she didn't move quietly. She walked into Whitmore's table at 7 a.m., 2 hours before her shift, went straight to Gerald's office, set her apron on his desk, folded and clean, right on top of his keyboard. "I quit." Gerald looked at the apron, then at her. Not surprised, annoyed. "You sure about that, Tanya? Jobs like this don't grow on trees for people like you." Tanya reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. 2 years of texts. Every time you told me to chase someone off the sidewalk. Every time you called them those people. Every email to the BID about keeping the block clean. I saved all of it. Gerald's coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. "You wouldn't." "I already did." She'd called Derek Nash the night before, sat in her apartment, scrolled through 2 years of messages and screenshots she'd forwarded to herself. She did it because she'd watched 2 girls sing barefoot on a sidewalk, and then watched a man try to erase them for it.
She was done keeping her mouth shut. Derek aired the follow-up segment 2 days before the festival. 12 minutes. He opened with the original clip, now over 2 million views, then layered in everything.
Tanya's texts on screen. Make sure the homeless are gone before dinner rush. I don't want those people near my front door. Timestamps clear. Pattern undeniable. Then the story of Harmony House. Public records, property deeds, tax auction filings. The photograph of Estelle in front of the building. Gerald's demolition permit filed 4 months after purchase. Same lot, same ground, different world.
Derek interviewed 3 former Harmony House students: a music teacher in Memphis, a touring bass player, a grandmother with her certificate still framed on her wall. Each said the same thing, different ways. That school saved my life. Pastor Holloway spoke last. Steady, quiet authority. He talked about Estelle, what she built, what was taken, and 2 granddaughters standing on the rubble of her legacy who didn't even know it. Until now.
Russell Grant saw the segment from his hotel room. White, mid-50s, 30 years producing gospel and soul. He'd heard 10 demos that week. None made him put down his drink. The Foster twins made him put it down, grab the remote, and rewind 3 times. Then he picked up his phone and made a call. A number he hadn't used in 2 years. A number most people in the industry would trade a kidney to have. 4 minutes. When it was done, he set the phone down and said to no one, "There it is." We don't know who he called. Not yet. The community started choosing sides, and it wasn't choosing Gerald's. Local businesses reached out through Pastor Holloway. A barber shop gave Solomon a fresh cut. A bookstore offered its back room for rehearsal. A taco truck fed them for 3 days straight. A music shop donated a speaker and microphone stand. The owner, Dorothy Wilson, drove it to the church herself. A clothing store donated 2 outfits. Simple. Clean. Enough to make the twins feel like they belonged on a stage. The morning of the festival, the committee made its final decision. Gerald's threat, $25,000, hung over the room. Brenda Caldwell spoke first. She didn't talk about money. She talked about Harmony House, about Estelle, about 2 girls who had every reason to stop and hadn't. Are we the kind of festival that lets one man's wallet decide who gets to be heard? The vote was 5-2. The twins stayed. Gerald pulled his sponsorship within the hour. The committee announced the gap publicly and set up a donation page with one line: "Help us keep the music playing." 2 hours, $31,000, $6,000 more than Gerald ever gave. $5 from a college student in Oregon, $100 from a gospel choir in Detroit with a note, "For Estelle." $500 from a woman in New York who wrote, "I was homeless once. Nobody let me sing either." Gerald spent 6 years believing his money held that festival together. A community needed 2 hours to prove him wrong. The stage was smaller than Gerald's. No corporate banners, no VIP section. Just a wooden platform on a side street, a donated speaker system, and a microphone stand Dorothy Wilson had driven over that morning. But by 4 o'clock, the side street was packed. 2,000 people. They came from everywhere. People who'd seen the clip, people who donated, church members from Greater Hope Baptist in matching t-shirts that read, "Estelle's Choir, still singing." Derek Nash was there with a full camera crew. 2 other local stations had shown up. A national morning show had sent a team from their Nashville bureau. And near the back of the crowd, arms crossed, half hidden behind a family of 4, Gerald Whitmore. He didn't announce himself. He just watched the stage the way a man watches something he thought he'd already killed. Brenda Caldwell kept her introduction short. Please welcome Solomon and Sienna Foster. The applause was immediate. Hungry. 2,000 people clapping before a single note, not because they knew what was coming, but because they knew what these two kids had survived to get here. Solomon walked out first. Clean shirt, fresh haircut. He looked different from the boy on the sidewalk, except his eyes. Steady, focused, carrying something heavy he'd learned how to balance. Sienna followed in a simple white dress, the locket against her chest. New shoes, the first pair in months that didn't need tape. They opened with His Eye is on the Sparrow, the sidewalk song, the one the internet knew by heart. The crowd recognized it instantly. Murmurs, people grabbing arms, phones rising like small lights. But the twins weren't here to repeat themselves. They sang the first verse the way the crowd expected. Then, midway through the second, Solomon shifted key. A half-step modulation most listeners wouldn't consciously notice, but would feel in their stomachs. Sienna matched him, and the melody changed. The gospel structure opened into something wider, older, more personal. His eye is on the sparrow, melted, like one river flowing into another, into a song nobody had ever heard. Estelle's song, the one she wrote alone on a piano older than herself, the one she never performed at church, the one that sat in a box in a church basement for 2 years, waiting. It was ready now. The melody was rooted in gospel, but reached further. It had the ache of blues without the resignation, the lift of soul without the performance. It sounded like a woman singing to her granddaughters about a house she built and lost and refused to let die. Because that's exactly what it was. The lyrics spoke about walls that came down, but music that stayed. About rooms that were taken, but voices that couldn't be. About planting something in the ground that no one could bulldoze, because it lived in the throats of the people who remembered. Then, in the middle of the third verse, Sienna stopped singing. The crowd held its breath. She reached up to the locket, the one she'd worn every day since Estelle died, the one she'd never opened in front of anyone. She opened it. Inside, a tiny photograph of their mother Denise, young and smiling, holding both twins as babies. And folded behind it, a scrap of paper in Estelle's handwriting. Sing, so they remember what stood here. Sienna held the locket up, not to the crowd, to the sky. The gesture was private, sacred, aimed at someone who wasn't there anymore. Solomon's voice cracked for half a second. Then he steadied, dropped into the deepest note he'd sung all evening, and Sienna came back in above him. Together, they hit the final passage, and there it was again, the third voice, the phantom overtone. It rose between them like smoke, invisible but undeniable. Every person in that crowd felt it in their chest, in their teeth, in the place behind their eyes where tears start before you know you're crying. A man in the front row covered his face and sobbed. A woman grabbed a stranger's arm. A teenager lowered his phone because he forgot he was holding it. They held the last note for 8 seconds. 2 voices, 1 sound, filling a side street with something that had been locked in a box, locked in a locket, locked in a family's grief for 2 years. Then, silence. Sacred silence. 4 seconds. Maybe 5. The front row stood, then the middle, then the back. 2,000 people on their feet, hands above their heads, the sound bouncing off buildings like an echo that didn't want to stop. Derek Nash's camera caught the performance, the locket, the crowd, but it also caught something most people missed the first time. Gerald Whitmore, back of the crowd, arms no longer crossed, hands at his sides, jaw loose, an expression that wasn't anger, wasn't arrogance, wasn't contempt. It was recognition, the kind that comes when you realize you've been wrong about something fundamental, about what a person is worth. He turned and walked away before the song ended. Nobody noticed. Nobody called his name. He just disappeared, like a man who finally understood the block didn't belong to him. It never did. When the applause faded, Brenda stepped to the microphone, holding the photograph from the church basement. Estelle Foster, young and smiling, in front of Harmony House. The ground Gerald Whitmore's restaurant sits on was once a music school called Harmony House, she said. One of its founders was Estelle Foster. Gerald bought the property at a tax auction. He tore the school down, built his restaurant on top of it. 2 nights ago, Estelle's granddaughters stood on his sidewalk, and he called them animals. She paused. Tonight, they rebuilt that school, with their voices, on a stage he tried to keep them off. Every one of you was a witness. The second wave of applause was different. It wasn't celebration, it was verdict. Gerald was already gone, but the crowd wasn't applauding for him to hear. They were applauding so that Estelle could. Russell Grant didn't wait for the applause to fade. He was moving through the crowd before the last clap landed. He found the twins backstage, a folding table behind a tarp, 2 plastic chairs, a cooler of donated water bottles. Solomon sat with elbows on knees, staring at the ground. Sienna stood beside him, one hand on the locket, the other on her sister's shoulder. Russell said his name and waited. 30 years in this business. Gospel, soul, R&B. I've worked with voices that sold out arenas and made grown men cry in recording booths. I have never heard 2 voices do what yours just did. He pulled out his phone, showed the call log. 1 outgoing call, 2 nights earlier, 4 minutes, 12 seconds. Diane Mercer, head of Atlas Records, Gospel and Soul Division. 20 years running that label. I played her your clip over the phone. She listened without a word. When it was done, she said 3 words. Bring them in. Solomon stood slowly. We don't have a manager. We don't have anything. We sleep under a bridge. Russell looked at him. You have voices that made 2,000 people forget how to breathe. That's not nothing. That's everything. The rest is details. Monday night, Derek Nash's full investigation aired nationally. The original clip, Tanya's texts, Harmony House history, the BID vote, the blog post, the festival performance. Evidence laid out with colder. 3 national networks, 10 million views, hashtag Foster Twins trending 4 straight days. Brenda's line, they rebuilt that school with of the festival. The consequences found Gerald Whitmore. Steadily. Like dominoes waiting years for the first one to fall, the BID removed him. 6-1. The 1 was his own vote. Whitmore's table got boycotted. College students stood outside every Friday, silent, holding phones playing the twins' performance on loop. Gerald called police twice. Both times, officers watched the clip and left without an arrest. His Yelp dropped to 1.5 stars. Not about the food, about the man. The steaks might be good, but the owner thinks homeless black children are animals. Gerald never made a public statement. He just went quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when a man who controlled the narrative realizes it left him behind. Within 2 months, new management. Gerald's name removed from everything. The new owners, a husband and wife team from the east side, hired Tanya Moore as general manager. First thing she did was take down the "no soliciting" sign Gerald had bolted to the front door. But what mattered most happened 6 weeks later. Brenda Caldwell brought a proposal to Nashville City Council. The block where Whitmore's table stood, where Harmony House was built and demolished, where a man threw a quarter at two barefoot girls, to be officially renamed. Approved unanimously. No debate. Estelle Foster Way, a bronze plaque at the corner. On this ground stood Harmony House, a music school founded in 1992 by black musicians and educators, including Estelle Foster. Though the building was demolished, the music endured, carried forward by the voices of those who remembered. The twins signed with Atlas Records 2 weeks later. Debut single, Estelle's Song. Cover art, the photograph from the locket. Solomon enrolled in music production. He told an interviewer, "My grandmother built the room. Someone tore it down. I want to build one that can't be torn down." Sienna started free vocal workshops for homeless youth at Greater Hope Baptist, same choir loft where Estelle trained voices for 31 years. First week, 4 kids. Second week, 11. By month's end, a waiting list. She started every session the same way, hand on the locket. The world is going to look at you and decide who you are before you open your mouth. So when you do open it, make sure they can never forget what they heard. Estelle's words. Estelle's room. Still breathing. Gerald's bet was never honored. He said he'd feed them for a month if they could sing. They sang. He walked away. But it didn't matter. The sidewalk where he threw that quarter was now Estelle Foster Way. The 2 girls he called animals had a record deal, a community behind them, and a story 10 million people refused to forget. Gerald never fed them. The world did. 6 months later, Solomon and Sienna came back to the block. No cameras, no publicist, no label escort. Just the 2 of them, walking down the same sidewalk where a man flicked a quarter at their feet and told them their voices were worthless. Sienna saw the street sign first. Estelle Foster Way. Green and white, catching the late afternoon light. She stood under it, one hand on the locket. The restaurant was different. New name, new awning. The patio full of families eating dinner. Nobody being turned away. Nobody being told they didn't belong. A little girl, maybe 8, black, braids tied with yellow ribbons, was walking with her mother. She stopped, eyes wide, tugged her mother's sleeve. "That's them. From the video." Her mother smiled and gave her a gentle push. The girl walked up to Sienna, hands behind her back, nervous. "Can you teach me to sing like that?" Sienna knelt down, looked at her the way Estelle used to look at every kid who walked into Harmony House for the first time. "Does your grandmother ever sing to you?" The girl nodded. "Then you already know how. You just haven't turned up the volume yet." The girl smiled. Her mother mouthed, "Thank you," and they walked on down Estelle Foster Way. The girl looked back twice before turning the corner. Solomon watched them go. "Last time we were here, we were begging." Sienna touched the locket. "Last time we were here, you said it was the last time we'd beg." Was I right? She looked at the street sign, the plaque, the patio where people were laughing, on the same ground where Estelle once taught children that music could save them. Yeah, you were right. They stood there another minute, not talking, not performing, just two people on a block now named after the woman who raised them. Then they turned and walked back up the street, side by side, the way they'd walked every day of their lives. Solomon's promise, "This is the last time we beg," turned out to be the truest thing he ever said. They never begged again. Because once the world heard what was inside them, it couldn't unhear it. And that's the thing about a voice that carries everything you've lost. You can ignore it, mock it, ban it, tear down the building where it was born, but you cannot make it disappear. It just finds a different room. Whew. This one stayed with me. A quarter on the ground, two girls with nothing, and a voice that shut down a whole block. If that was you, exit. You'll see it.